A rocky beginning for Emily. Emily Carter had always imagined that her life after marriage would be filled with warmth, laughter, and the gentle comfort of family. At 27, she left her bustling apartment in downtown Seattle to move into her husband's childhood home in the quiet suburbs of Charleston, South Carolina. Naively hopeful, Emily believed that this transition would represent a new chapter, one defined by togetherness and mutual support. But almost immediately, her dreams collided with reality. The sun-dappled exterior of the old, white-painted colonial house hid an atmosphere brimming with tension. Her mother-in-law, Judith Miller, a stern woman in her early 60s, made little effort to disguise her skepticism of Emily. From the very first day, Judith scrutinized every aspect of Emily's behavior. How she organized the pantry, folded the laundry, even the way she greeted the mailman. There was a sharpness to Judith's remarks, a constant undertone that suggested Emily would never measure up. Emily's husband, Mark, a quiet accountant 2 years her senior, tried his best to keep the peace. But peace was hard to find when Judith and Mark's younger sister, Alexis, who was still living at home while finishing law school, formed an unyielding alliance. Alexis, with her quick wit and biting sarcasm, found endless opportunities to poke fun at Emily's efforts. Small, supposedly harmless jokes at the dinner table left Emily feeling diminished and out of place. Any attempt to join family conversations was met with blank stares or thinly veiled sighs. In this new environment, Emily began to shrink into herself. Her texts with old friends from Seattle grew less frequent. She hesitated before voicing her opinions, terrified of triggering another cold, dismissive comment from Judith or a cutting quip from Alexis. Even Mark, who had once been her confidant and champion, seemed anxious and distant, often deflecting with a nervous joke or hurrying off to his study the moment tension sparked. Slowly, Emily realized that she wasn't just struggling to fit into a family. She was being pushed out, bit by bit, and no one seemed to care. What stung the most was the isolation. The bustling neighborhood she had left behind was replaced by the hush of southern afternoons, punctuated only by whispers she knew weren't meant for her. Emily began to question her choices, her worth, and even her marriage. In her heart, a storm was quietly brewing, one that would soon sweep through not just her own life, but the entire Miller household. Facing the in-laws from hell, living under the Miller roof felt like stepping onto a carefully camouflaged minefield every single morning. Emily could never predict which version of her mother-in-law, Judith, she'd meet at breakfast. The steely, silent judge who only sighed at a misplaced cereal box, or the more vocal interrogator, ready with barbed questions about chores, recipes, and, most painfully, when she would finally become a real Miller. Judith's standards seemed insurmountable, and any attempt by Emily to meet them was either dismissed or dissected in excruciating detail over dinner. The real sting, though, came from Alexis, Mark's younger sister, a 24-year-old law student with a razor tongue and a talent for turning every conversation into a debate she had to win. Alexis took a perverse delight in poking holes in Emily's logic, fashion sense, or even the way she sipped her morning coffee. To Alexis, Emily was the ultimate outsider, too Seattle, too hopeful, too eager to please in a southern home where fish-out-of-water stories never ended well. Emily's daily victories, no matter how minor, slipped quietly beneath the radar. One day, she managed to make peach cobbler from scratch, only to have Alexis single out the topping as almost passable, and Judith comment that Mark's ex had done it better. Often, After these exhausting meals, Emily sought solace in solitary walks around the block, swallowing back tears before stepping inside again, mask firmly in place. Mark, caught between loyalty to his family and affection for his wife, retreated further with every skirmish. Instead of standing up for Emily, he diffused moments of tension with nervous laughter or the agitated shuffle of papers, signaling he had work stuff to check in his study. Over time, Emily noticed these escapes became more frequent as the atmosphere in the house grew heavier. Inwardly, Emily waged a silent battle. Each cutting remark from Judith or sarcastic jab from Alexis chipped away at her spirit, leaving her doubting not just her place in the Miller household, but her own self-worth. The vibrant, independent woman she'd once been seemed distant, replaced by someone who counted the hours until bedtime and woke up bracing for the next round. The beautiful colonial house, from which she'd expected warmth and belonging, now felt more like a gilded cage, one where she was watched, weighed, and always found lacking. But even as she felt increasingly isolated, a stubborn ember inside Emily refused to be entirely smothered. Deep down, she began to suspect that the friction in the Miller household ran far deeper than her own struggles, and that perhaps, just perhaps, she wasn't the only one hiding secrets lurking in the old house. The Anderson home had always seemed a little too perfect. Ivory walls lined with sepia-toned photos, thick carpets muffling every step, treasures passed down for generations displayed behind locked glass. To Emily, it felt like living inside a museum, a place where nothing was out of place, but everything felt strangely hollow. One rainy Tuesday, craving solitude, Emily offered to organize the basement, a cluttered, shadowy world no one else ever touched. She found molded cardboard boxes stuffed under the stairs, old window frames stacked against musty trunks, and entire decades left to gather dust. It was here, kneeling beside a broken mirror, that Emily uncovered a battered leather briefcase wedged behind a false wall panel. She hesitated before opening it, almost as if she might be trespassing on a private piece of history. Inside, perfectly folded under layers of yellowing newspaper, lay a set of legal documents, faded photographs, and an envelope inscribed in shaky, careful script. For my daughter. Her heart pounding, Emily sorted through the paperwork. There was a birth certificate for a girl named Grace Bennett. Her date of birth predated Matt's by several years. Alongside it, a stack of hospital records, a faded family photo where a woman with Eleanor's eyes held a baby that wasn't Matt or Lauren, and at the very bottom, a copy of a notarized will. The will, drawn up by Eleanor's late husband around the time Grace was born, named Grace the primary inheritor of a lakeside property in Vermont, worth over $1 million in today's market. Shocked, Emily tried to piece together what she was seeing. Who was Grace Bennett? Why was her existence tucked away in a forgotten briefcase instead of a family album? Why did Matt and Lauren seem ignorant of any other sibling? Had Eleanor cut ties with her own daughter? Or was she keeping everyone else in the dark to protect herself? Emily's mind raced. Scenes from the last several months replayed through a new lens. Eleanor's fierce possessiveness, her insistence that true family never keeps secrets, Lauren's biting comments about loyalty. None of it quite fit if there were secrets this massive lurking beneath the surface. Later that night, Emily hid the file under her sweaters and took photos on her phone, her hands trembling. She barely slept, the whispers of family betrayal swirling in her head. Every strained dinner conversation and pointed remark now seemed to conceal more than simple disapproval.
Oh, hello,
But
darling.
the
What a
mystery
lovely surprise.
didn't end there.
Yes, of course
Over
I'd
the
love
next
to.
few
You two
days,
so much.
Emily began noticing odd details. Locked desk drawers in Eleanor's hobby room, heated phone calls in the middle of the night, Matt's anxious refusals to talk about certain names. When she pressed gently, Matt would change the subject, his gaze fixed on the floor. Unable to share the truth with anyone in the house, Emily reached out to her older sister, Rachel Campbell, a pragmatic New York attorney. On a call filled with whispered details and shared disbelief, Rachel's advice was clear. You're onto something big, Em. Be smart, be careful, and keep digging. Secrets this old don't stay buried forever. That night, with storm winds rattling the windows of the Anderson estate, Emily realized something profound. The home wasn't haunted by her presence at all. It was haunted by its own ghosts, and she held the key to finally setting them free. Reaching out for Abby's help. The loneliness Emily felt was a constant, oppressive haze, thickening by the day as the Weatherford family's secrets pressed closer. Every attempted conversation with Mark about what she'd found dissolved into awkward silences or defensive shrugs. She couldn't turn to Judith, not with that woman's icy suspicion lurking in every glance. And Olivia seemed to relish every small sign of emotional fragility. The house, and everyone in it, seemed to be closing in, keeping her questions and fears penned up tight. It was a Friday night when Emily finally broke. Rain battered the Savannah windows, and the house felt especially cold and echoing. Alone in the guest bedroom, surrounded by scenes of distant Weatherford relatives, she finally dialed the one number she knew by heart. Her sister Abby's. Abigail Turner, Abby to everyone but their late grandmother, was everything Emily felt she was not. At 34, living in New York City, Abby was a fearless litigator with a reputation for turning the tide in impossible cases. Sharp, deeply loyal, and fiercely loving, Abby had grown up protecting her younger sister through schoolyard drama, college heartbreaks, and the tribulations of adulthood. The moment Abby heard Emily's wavering greeting, she fell silent and listened. Over the next hour, Emily poured out everything: the cruel jokes, the loneliness, Mark's withdrawal, the hostile remarks about Northern girls, and finally, the discovery in the basement. She described the secret will, the letters, and the strange half-smile on Judith's face whenever Emily appeared uneasy. She didn't spare details, and for the first time in months, she didn't have to swallow her pain. As Emily's words tumbled out, Abby's initial shock hardened into focused resolve. She asked sharp, pragmatic questions. Had Emily copied every document? Did she have physical evidence? Had Mark noticed her investigating? Abby didn't speak in soft reassurances. She began planning, mapping a strategy before the call was even over. "Listen, Em, I'm flying down," Abby declared. "You're not facing this alone anymore. And if they think they can strong-arm you or steal your future, they're about to meet a different kind of Weatherford storm." Emily's anxiety eased immediately, a reassuring warmth spreading through her chest. She had been fighting shadows. Now, suddenly, she felt a shield at her back. 3 days later, Emily met Abby at the small Savannah airport. Abby strode off the plane with a lawyer's briefcase and a New Yorker's confidence, her hug crushing away months of built-up tension. That first evening, in a coffee shop far from the Weatherford glare, Abby sketched their plan. Emily showed her the photos, each sheet of evidence fanning the flames of Abby's determination. Abby insisted on documenting everything meticulously. They cross-referenced signatures, snapshotted every locked drawer, and charted out all times Judith made those strange, clandestine calls. Knowing the family's social calendar, they scheduled their own movements to catch whispers of suspicion and odd late-night exchanges. With Abby's perspective, even Olivia's sarcasm started sounding more like fear than malice. Most importantly, Abby didn't just investigate. She restored Emily's courage. The two reconnected over childhood stories, strategic brainstorms, and late-night cups of cocoa. Abby reminded Emily that she was more than just a bystander in the Weatherford saga. She had a voice, rights, and now an ally who refused to be intimidated by old Southern money or inherited silence. The simple act of having someone in her corner changed everything. Emily stood straighter at the dinner table. She returned Olivia's barbs with careful, sectioned answers and watched Judith for tells. With each day, she and Abby built not just a case, but the beginning of a comeback, a quiet but resolute shifting of balance in a house long ruled by secrets and fear. What started as a desperate call in the night became Emily's first bold step out of isolation, and the Weatherford matriarch, for the first time, sensed the ground shifting beneath her carefully guarded world. The sisters' counterattack plan. With every new secret exposed, the Weatherford house seemed to tremble with tension. The sisters knew time was running short before Martha or Olivia sensed the investigation. So their next move had to be both strategic and bold. Abby, ever the tactician, outlined their plan late one night in Emily's room, papers spread out between them like blueprints for a heist. First, we gather bulletproof evidence, Abby insisted, eyes gleaming with determination. No room for Weatherford denial or convenient forgetfulness. You keep copies of everything as insurance. We document the inheritance trail, the unrecognized child, and any cover-up attempts. Every odd text, every locked drawer, photograph it. Every odd phone call, every contradiction, write it down. Days became a whirlwind of covert operations. Emily monitored Martha's emails and watched for clues in Olivia's late-night conversations with friends. Abby spent afternoons visiting the county courthouse under the guise of a visiting historian, quietly requesting birth and property records that corroborated the basement findings. When Martha noticed a folder slightly out of place, Emily deflected suspicion with gentle apologies, acting every bit the eager-to-please daughter-in-law. The sisters met in town for coffee, sharing updates in public spaces where the Weatherfords' prying ears couldn't reach. Abby brought in trusted legal contacts from Chicago, asking pointed questions about Georgia inheritance law without ever revealing personal details. These consultations confirmed their fears. If left unchallenged, Martha could continue hiding the inheritance, and David might never learn of the half-sibling whose existence had been erased from family lore. To sharpen their case, Abby insisted that Emily keep a daily log of every interaction. They noted every veiled threat, every whispered argument behind closed doors, every slip Olivia let drop about things better left unsaid. On evenings when Emily's nerves failed, Abby's fierce encouragement kept her resolute. Remember, Em, you've already survived the worst. Now we're playing chess while they're playing checkers. We don't move until we have them cornered. One evening, after a particularly cruel dinner conversation in which Martha belittled Emily's career ambitions, the sisters knew the time for subtlety was ending. They drafted a letter, addressed jointly to David and Martha, outlining the evidence they possessed, without giving away everything. This, Abby explained, was the first of their pressure points.
Knowledge is armor.
It was a warning shot, a demand for honesty before the matter went public or legal. Meanwhile, Abby worked on a full legal brief, anticipating every Weatherford defense maneuver. She prepped Emily for every possible counter: emotional manipulation, gaslighting, threats to cut them off from family resources. Abby's sharpest weapon was her ability to predict fear-driven reactions and plan for them in advance. If they try to paint you as unstable, we have character witnesses. If they accuse you of theft, we show digital timestamps. No dead ends. Knowing the family cherished reputation above all else, the sisters also compiled a discreet list of sympathetic relatives, cousins and aunts, who had once confided in Emily about Martha's controlling ways. Quietly, Abby helped Emily draft messages, prepping them to respond if accusations or rumors spread. As days passed, the Weatherford house became a battlefield. But for the first time, Emily wasn't just reacting, she was strategizing. Every sideways glance was data. Every forced apology, ammunition. Each small victory, a folder surreptitiously copied, a relative quietly offering support, strengthened her resolve. The oppressive weight of the mansion's secrets felt lighter now that Abby stood at her side, matching her step for step. Emily transformed from a woman hiding in the shadows to a player in the game. Through Abby's guidance and her growing determination, she realized the fight wasn't just for truth. It was for her own dignity and peace of mind. The counterattack was underway, and for the first time since arriving in Georgia, Emily believed she could win. The truth unravels. Emily's days leading up to the family gathering felt like moving through dense fog, each hour slow, each step heavy with anticipation. Despite Abby's unwavering presence and her own newfound courage, Emily couldn't shake a sense of foreboding. Beneath the stately calm of the Weatherford mansion, secrets pressed in from every shadow. The family's annual spring weekend was always a grand occasion. Distant relatives from across the South streamed in. The dining room table groaned under the weight of home-cooked dishes, and the conversation sparkled or simmered with old stories. But this year, a different energy rippled beneath the hospitality. Suspicion and a tremulous hush, as if intuiting unseen fault lines ready to shatter. Abby and Emily spent the morning in Emily's bedroom, rehearsing every phrase and each possible turn of events. Abby, as ever, had lists, evidence cataloged, questions prepared, and fallback arguments in case of deflection or anger. Emily barely recognized herself in the mirror as she secured the flash drive containing documents under her dress blouse. A far cry from the timid woman who had once been afraid to speak up at the dinner table. The party began with sparkling cider, piano music, and the clinking of glasses. People milled about, toasting the family matriarch, Martha, and recounting childhood escapades. Emily noticed how Martha's eyes darted around the room, a queen checking for threats to her territory. Olivia, usually so brash, was quieter, glancing over her shoulder at Emily with wary calculation. Even David, typically warm and gregarious, seemed distant, lost in his own thoughts. When dinner was finally served, fried chicken, collard greens, cornbread, everything at once familiar and heavy. Abby signaled Emily with a nod. The two sisters had agreed. After the meal, when everyone was feeling comfortable and conversation lulled, they would start. As the last plates were cleared and the first pours of bourbon emerged, Emily rose, voice steady but trembling inside. "I have something I need to share with the family, a matter that affects all of us." Her words seemed to freeze the room. Martha's back straightened, Olivia's face tightened, and David turned sharply in his seat. For a long moment, no one moved. Abby stood beside her, gum-faced. "This affects not just Emily, but the entire legacy of the Weatherfords. We believe the time has come for honesty." All eyes flickered between the sisters. Someone, an elderly aunt, muttered, "What's all this about?" Emily took a breath and set the folder in front of Martha, opening it so all could see. Birth certificate, the original will, a collage of old grainy photos, and timelines Abby had drafted. I discovered these documents hidden in the basement weeks ago. They prove there is another Weatherford, Grace. Martha's face drained of color, and for the first time, she seemed unable to summon her usual icy composure. Olivia leaned forward, voice dangerously low. "You're out of your depth. This is family business." "This is my family, too," Emily replied, her own voice tremulous but determined. Abby picked up, her legal tone clear and measured. "This will is legitimate. Grace was cut out of this family. According to state law, this inheritance belongs to her, not to be hidden or erased because of convenience or shame. What's more, we have phone records, witness statements, and every piece of correspondence that shows deliberate concealment." Murmurs erupted around the table. A distant cousin spoke. "Grace? A sister no one told us about?" Others exchanged shocked glances. But Martha seemed paralyzed, her hands trembling as she stared down at the evidence presided over by Abby and Emily. The silence stretched as the implications settled. David stood up abruptly, his voice rough. "Is this true, Mother? Is there really another Weatherford child? Did Father know?" Martha's lips pressed tight. For a moment, Emily saw not the formidable matriarch, but a woman tenaciously holding on to a crumbling secret, exhausted from decades of pretense. "I did what I had to," Martha said, words brittle. "Your father and I, yes, there was a daughter, Grace, from before, but it's not as simple as you'd think." Her voice faltered, every eye upon her. Abby pressed gently. "But why hide her? Why lie to your own son, to your whole family?" Martha took a shaky breath and began, haltingly, a story that had been buried for a quarter of a century. Grace, she revealed, was the product of her youthful first marriage, annulled before she'd met David's father, determined to start anew and protect her reputation and the Weatherford fortune. She'd consented to erase Grace from every ledger and family tree, paying off lawyers and ensuring silence from older relatives. "It was never meant to be cruel," Martha whispered. "At the time, it was how things were done." David's face was ashen. Emily's heart ached, seeing him caught between outrage and sorrow. "But what of Grace?" Emily asked quietly. "Where is she now?" A long silence. Finally, Martha admitted she had lost track of her eldest daughter after the girl turned 18 and left for New England. As far as she knew, Grace had changed her name and cut all ties with her past. It was Olivia, of all people, who spoke next, her voice rough with tears. "Why didn't you tell me? We could have found her. We could have shared this, together." Other voices crowded in, shocked, betrayed, others still murmuring, "Unbelievable." The Weatherford veneer of perfection splintered, and old grievances started bubbling up. Abby stepped in to keep the room focused. "There's more," she said, motioning to the inheritance documents. "We have an obligation to reach out to Grace, and the family fortune can't be transferred, sold, or even managed legally without her consent. There will need to be restitution, public notice, and, if Grace demands it, legal proceedings." Martha nodded slowly, almost defeated. "I will cooperate, whatever it takes. But please, let's keep this as private as we can, for the family's sake." But the relatives were already whispering, some angry, some scandalized, a few quietly grateful the truth had come out after so long. Emily felt herself shaking, but it wasn't fear. It was exhilaration, a strange relief, the weight she had carried for months finally breaking apart. In the days after the party, the Weatherford household reverted to a strange, grieving silence. Martha retreated entirely into her rooms. Olivia, once so domineering, began spending more time away from the estate. David was subdued, barely speaking, processing years of deception. Abby and Emily wasted no time. With the evidence secured and Martha's admission, they set about tracking down Grace. Armed with clues from the old documents, a high school name, a yearbook photo, hospital discharge notes, they scoured archives and reached out to private investigators. Emily, to her own surprise, found herself scanning registries, databases, reaching out to small-town librarians and alumni groups. She was relentless, fueled by the urgency of righting old wrongs and wanting, more than anything, to meet the person who had been erased from her new family's story. At the same time, the legal machinery ground forward. Abby drafted letters to the Weatherford lawyers, copying pertinent records to the county court. The estate's executors were put on formal notice that a previously unknown beneficiary existed. There were tense conference calls, some quasi-threatening emails from the family's old guard attorneys, and demands for confidentiality from Martha and Olivia. But the tide was already turning. With David's subdued support and public records at their side, Abby and Emily were no longer easy to silence. The Weatherford estate, always prim and controlled, now felt like a courtroom, each interaction charged with questions and unspoken fears. Late nights found Emily and Abby in the kitchen, piecing together bits of Grace's life from start to finish. They learned she'd entered college out of state under a different name. A handful of letters, found wedged in a book in the attic, hinted at longing, loneliness, and a stubborn refusal to seek her mother's approval. The letters ended abruptly a decade ago. The rest was a mystery. But with every new clue, the sisters grew more determined. Abby's tenacity rubbed off on Emily. She no longer felt cowed by old Southern propriety or the threat of being forgotten. Instead, she felt more herself than ever, defiant, hopeful, and fiercely protective of a truth too long denied. One evening, word arrived from a private investigator. A woman matching Grace's description was living under a new name in Vermont, teaching piano at a local school. Never married, no children. Her records bore enough markers, old birth date, place of origin, for Abby to confirm. The sisters debated how best to reach out, direct letter or through the court. In the end, they agreed on empathy. A handwritten note on Weatherford stationery, signed by both Abby and Emily, inviting Grace to reconnect, offering unconditional support for whatever came next. Sending the letter felt momentous, an act of hope planted in tangled family soil. As they waited, the atmosphere in the house shifted again, a mix of dread, anticipation, and, for Emily and Abby, relief. The truth, once a hidden threat, was now their shield. For Emily, it was as if the old house itself stood lighter, no longer pressing down upon her, but finally releasing its secrets to the light. Resolution and turning point. In the shadowed quiet of the Weatherford estate, the days after the revelations crawled by at a surreal pace. For Emily, each new sunrise marked a gradual untangling, not just of family secrets, but of her own sense of identity, hope, and belonging. The house itself seemed changed, the air clearer, the old walls less oppressive. It was as if, finally, it could exhale after decades of silent collusion. At the outset, the family was thrust into chaos. Martha retreated behind the closed doors of her bedroom, granting no one an explanation beyond her public admission. Olivia, so long the family sentinel and occasional antagonist, shed her vaunted superiority and became suddenly quiet and reserved, almost spectral in her presence. Family members visited in tense intervals, attempting polite conversation, but inevitably circling back to the biggest question of all. What would happen now? David, caught between empathy for his mother and outrage over the dishonesty, drifted through the halls, rarely making eye contact with anyone. He looked as if years had sloughed away from him overnight. Emily, on the other hand, underwent a startling transformation. Gone was the woman who cowered in the kitchen or silenced herself at the dinner table. With Abby at her side and the truth laid bare, Emily found her poise, her strength, and above all, her direction. It was a coming of age that felt almost defiant in the face of Southern tradition. It was also the culmination of everything she'd been fighting for since the day she arrived in the Weatherford family. The right to dignity, the courage to demand answers, and the sanity of letting go. The legal process was painstaking, but Abby relished every step. She coordinated with Grace, who had responded to their handwritten letter with a tentative but powerful message of her own. Grace, wary after so many years, abandoned and erased, agreed to a series of calls before stepping foot inside her former home. Her voice, gentle, mature, and well-guarded, but unmistakably proud, brought a fresh breeze to the stagnant legacy of Martha's empire. For the first time since the ordeal began, Emily felt self-forgiveness blooming within her. She was not the cause of the Weatherford misfortune, but the catalyst for healing. Abby arranged for a mediated family meeting on neutral ground in the offices of a local notary. The Weatherford clan, minus a reclusive Martha, assembled around a massive conference table, each weighed down by competing emotions. As moderator, Abby introduced Grace, who sat tall in a sensible blue suit, her gaze unwavering as she met the family who had once cast her out. The air was taut with remorse, fear, and what passed for hope. Grace's presence forced the Weatherfords to confront what they'd long denied, that every family secret belonged not just to the one who hid it, but to everyone who lived in its shadow. Olivia broke the ice first, apologizing sincerely and emotionally, her words halting but authentic. David was next, assuring Grace that he wanted to know his half-sister and offering a future with less judgment and more honesty. While the matter of inheritance was serious, a legal reshuffling of assets, a revision of wills, and a negotiation led by Abby, it was the emotional resolution that truly marked the turning point. Grace did not seek revenge or financial compensation. Instead, she asked only for an open door to connect with her brother, and the truth documented, not hidden. She stipulated that her name be restored in the family tree, and that a scholarship be created in her late father's name for children in need, as penance for the years of silence. Emily found herself weeping quietly, not just for Grace, but for the wounds inflicted on everyone in the room by years of appearances and pride. Abby, unflinching as ever, guided the family through the last bureaucratic hurdles and then turned to Emily. "You did this," she said. "You ended the lie." Yet, the end of secrecy came at a price. In the weeks following, Emily and David faced an impasse. His reluctance to intervene during the ordeal had carved too deep a gulf in their marriage. They spoke honestly, sometimes tenderly, sometimes angrily, about where to go from there. In the end, a mutual decision was made to separate, at least for now. They promised civility and continued respect. But Emily knew her chapter in the Weatherford household was closing for good. Liberated and resilient, Emily packed her bags, each belonging a token from a life well fought for. With Abby's encouragement, she moved north to New York City, eager to chart new territory, a city pulsing with anonymity, promise, and, most of all, second chances. The two sisters, joined by hard-won trust, decided to open an advocacy law firm for women entangled in familial and inheritance disputes. Their clients came from all backgrounds: young wives, overlooked daughters, women whose stories had been silenced by family tradition, and generations of discretion. Emily's experience, once a source of shame, became her greatest asset. In consultation after consultation, she invoked her own courage, gently coaxing frightened clients through legal mazes, encouraging them never to settle for partial truths or muted selves. At every opportunity, she reminded them, "Your story matters. The truth will set you free." Back in Georgia, the Weatherford estate entered a period of introspection. Martha never again resumed the role of undisputed matriarch, instead spending her days in the company of old friends. Olivia slowly rebuilt her relationship with her half-sister, sending letters first, then invitations for visits. David found comfort in the honesty he had so long avoided, becoming an advocate in his community for the importance of transparency in family matters. Grace chose not to move back, but the letters between her and David grew more frequent and warm. She visited over Christmas, meeting younger cousins and teaching them to play the piano, quietly restoring small fragments of family that had once been shattered. As months passed, the Weatherfords slowly reconciled with the new shape of their family. The silence that once suffocated every room was replaced by cautious conversation, and then, gradually, by laughter and shared pain. And Emily, for the first time in years, felt not just free, but purposeful. With Abby at her side, she transformed hardship into hope for others, her resolve remaining as unshakable as ever, to uncover secrets, to find closure, and to prove that no family, no matter how old or proud, could hold a woman back from her full story.